Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Stand-Up. So we're back on the Trello board today, and you can see that since we haven't been here in a while, my in-progress ticket for adding the endpoint to pull the engine data from a MySQL instance in Rust is like halfway done. If you remember from probably over a month ago, I did add a REST. I stood up an API in Rust with Actix, and I exposed an endpoint that you can call, and it'll query the database and return data. So I have all that effectively set up. I just have to implement it all the way. So this is kind of like in a halfway done spot, to be honest with you. But I want to kind of leave it the way it is right now and effectively switch to this ticket here. So this is going to be a big one. And honestly, this is going to be an introduction to hopefully some really, really good and technical content for a continuation of this daily stand-up series. So we've been doing the daily stand-up series for, I want to say, I think 7 or 8 months. And I want to introduce kind of like a sub-series on this explicitly dedicated to RabbitMQ. And I'll tell you how I got here, and I'll tell you what the plan is. But I'm going to fill this ticket out, and I'm going to show you kind of, hopefully, where we're going. So the classic what on the ticket is we are going to switch from using mass transit to EasyNetQ. And I'm going to tell you why in a second, but that's what we're going to be doing. Explore all the message properties of RabbitMQ, dive into AMQP, and why. Honestly, the why is more of like an experimentation, just honestly to learn more. Learn more about RabbitMQ. And done when we have implemented EasyNetQ. Okay, so that's the gist of this. This is definitely going to be a 5-point story, and I think I put points just here because I didn't have a spot for it. Okay, so the reason I'm switching, or I want to switch from mass transit to EasyNetQ is EasyNetQ is going to provide me, I think, a little bit more kind of bare bones connection to RabbitMQ without going just kind of like a raw connection factory. Mass Transit's really good, and it's worked really well up to this point. I just wanted to explore another library to connect to RabbitMQ, but one that's a little more kind of bare bones. And EasyNetQ, if you've ever used it, is basically just kind of like a lightweight, essentially wrapper library that allows you to connect to RabbitMQ. But they have an advanced API section that I was looking into, and it's actually really nice. Like, it's really, really good, and it makes it really easy to work with a lot of AMQP's message frame properties, and it does it in a way that just kind of works well. And honestly, I'm not really using a lot of stuff that makes mass transit nice anyway. I'm not using sagas. I'm not using the rechar policies right now, at least. I'm not planning to switch to a different queue, which is a big advantage as to why you might want to use mass transit. I'm just not using a lot of the power built into that library. So I think it's a good time to switch to another one and to explore more of like the raw protocol of what makes AMQP unique and interesting, and see how RabbitMQ adheres to that protocol of 0.9.1, I think it is. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing. So as we kind of walk through this, I just want to pull up this. So this is kind of the plan moving forward for this RabbitMQ series. And I should say that how I got here, I'm going to first pull up how I got here. And my code is somewhere. So this is the code that I was working on a few videos ago now. So this is mass transit. So this is in the program CS. So this is just registering mass transit. And you can see that we have just some standard configuration. But what I'd like to avoid, honestly, is having to do all this manual deserialization and all the stuff that you have to do with that. But also, one thing that I was kind of messing with and that you saw in the last video is this publisher confirmation that I explicitly set on the host. That was kind of like my first introduction of like experimenting with some of like the settings in mass transit, and I just don't have a lot of like visibility into what or how it's handling that flag. I don't know what property it's setting, honestly, on that message frame that's getting sent to RabbitMQ, and I just want that a little more visibility. Honestly, just a little more raw connection to my RabbitMQ server. So I'm going to get that a little bit more, I think, with EasyNetQ. Not that I couldn't do it with mass transit, but I think it might work better just for what I want to do. So that's what I'm going to do. And that's kind of how we got here, because I started looking at this and I started just reading more about mass transit, and I started reading more about RabbitMQ, and I picked up a book called RabbitMQ in Depth. It's by Manning Publications. Honestly, if you haven't read Manning publication books, they just consistently put out very, very high quality technical books. And honestly, like, you can get like Packet books, like Packet publishers. You can get Pearson. What's another one I'm thinking of? O'Reilly. Manning's is consistently quality. Packet is a hit or miss. O'Reilly is pretty good. But for whatever reason, all the stuff I've read in Manning publications is just very, very high quality. So they put out a book on RabbitMQ, and I'm reading that. So I'm going to try to make a mini series based as I'm kind of walking through the book to honestly help me learn and just to save my notes somewhere. So I'm going to be essentially filling out this PowerPoint as I go and as I'm working through the code. So the big one is going to be switching from mass transit to EasyNetQ, and I'm going to be diving more into the AMQP message frames. I'm going to be going into queues and exchanges, persistent versus non-persistent messages, highly available queues. I might get into clustering, I'm not sure. Fan out versus topic, and just a whole bunch of other stuff. So this is going to be a really, really, hopefully a dense series full of information. Hopefully it's a good complement. Like, hopefully it complements the daily stand-up series well, as we're kind of going to be rolling back into that. So as we kind of explain things, there's going to be a lot of demos, just a lot of just trial and error in code. This is not going to be a how-to series at all. That's not what I do on my channel. It's just going to be just raw experimentation, just what happens, what works, what doesn't. I'm going to try things in the code, and it might not work, but that's what this is for, and hopefully it's a good learning tool. And honestly, this is the most transparent, down-to-earth, and I think realistic way to talk about something like this, is just to walk through it in some series like this, because this is like this is like what it is day to day. You're just trying and experimenting. One thing that is going to be interesting is actually getting into the frame of the message that's sent to RabbitMQ and the properties that you have available to you. One of them is persistence, or the delivery mode, and you can toggle that between 1 and 2. And what I didn't know is that, so RabbitMQ, when you publish a message to the to your exchange that gets routed to the queue, I didn't know that the queue saves effectively a pointer to the message, and the message is saved elsewhere. So if you have persistence on your queue, it'll be saved to the whatever the server disk is, right? It'll be saved to the drive. But if you don't have persistence on, it saves it to in memory. So if your server ever goes down, then you lose all the messages. So if you need that security, then you need to mark your messages as persistent. And I don't believe that they're marked as persistent by default. Now that might vary depending on what library you're using, but it's something to keep in mind if you are connecting, especially if you're making a raw connection to RabbitMQ. If your data is really sensitive, you want to have persistence on there. So if your servers go down, like we saw happen, a couple weeks ago globally with a huge outage, not with RabbitMQ, but just with Windows servers in general, you're going to want to have that level of persistence. And also, but I didn't know that the queue themselves, I didn't know that in RabbitMQ, the queue itself doesn't save or store the data. It just stores the pointer to the data. And that's very interesting. And so we're going to be talking about that. Hopefully, we're going to be talking about exchanges, routing, queues, different types of queues, and things like that. Trying to think of what else. I don't know how much of like the specific protocol we're going to get into. So advanced message queuing protocol. I think I'm just going to stick with the 0.9.1 specification. I don't think we're going to go to the 1.0 spec, specifically because I don't know if RabbitMQ adheres to that or implements that 1.0 protocol without adding in like an additional plugin. I'm not sure, so I'm just going to stick with, I think, 0.9.1. And then I'm going to try to talk about, or I guess show the code making a switch to EasyNetQ. And if there's a better library to use for connecting to RabbitMQ, I'm still not 100% sold on switching to EasyNetQ. It just came up in a like a comparison as different libraries you can use. I don't know if I'm just gonna, I could just do a literal just connection, but it's kind of nice to have a library just already handle like having classes available for you for what the properties are that you can set on the frame. This kind of just quality of life things, but a lot of it is kept to you. The few experiments I want to run are publishing messages versus sending messages. I want to try to have multiple consumers subscribed to the same queue, and then show how a fan out versus a topic handles it differently. And I want to have experiments showing sending messages without persistence, stop my server, run it back up, and then see what happens to the messages, and then mark it as persistent, and then do the same thing. I don't know how much I'm going to get into being able to do clustering locally. If there's a way to do that, I'll see, but usually they have to be in different locations. Well, there might be a way. I don't know. I'm going to look that up. I'll see. But again, it's all running locally, so we'll see. But yeah, so we're going to be back in the two-stroke engines library or solution that we've been in here for months. So if you've seen the last videos, it's all going to be the same code, so everyone should be up to speed. And yeah, if you have any more thoughts on what you want to see in terms of experiments, or in terms of anything with queues or anything, whatever, just let me know. We can do whatever we want on this series. But yeah, so that's, I think, all I have for today. So I'll see you on the next one.